Hello and welcome to Start the Beat with Sikes. My name is Sikes and this is my podcast. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank everyone who checked out the last episode. If you're one of the people who listen to that conversation, I hope you enjoyed it and thanks so much for coming back. But for those of you out there who are new to the show, welcome. Please feel free to make yourselves at home. And as always, there's beer and soda in the fridge. So we're a couple weeks into the new year. Things are good. Been playing some shows. They've all gone pretty well. If you were at any of those events, thanks for coming out. And I hope that you and your friends enjoyed yourselves if you were there with friends. If you were there by yourself, I hope you made a friend. If you didn't make a friend, I hope you still had a good time regardless. And if you had a bad time, I'm sorry. I'll do my best to make it up to you in the future. Anyways, moving along, let's see what else has been up. This past Sunday, I was actually just a guest on my friends Ben and Greg's podcast, Neon Brainiacs. If you have not checked that show out or ever heard of it, I recommend it. It's an 80s horror podcast. So if you're into 80s horror movies, it's for you. Yes, and I was a guest. We discussed one of my favorite 80s cult classics. I'm not going to spoil what it was because they're not releasing it for a few weeks, but highly suggest you looking them up on whatever podcast service you subscribe to and, checking out their show and keeping an eye out for my stupid face on it. Also, next weekend, January 25th, I'm going to be doing a live episode of Start the Beat with 3 other podcasts. Neon Brainiacs, who I was just talking about, being one of them, and the other 2 podcasts being the Thrifty Podcast and Ghoul on Ghoul. It's going to be 4 separate podcasts, one night. Pretty cool, laid back, fun, informative, goofy night with some pretty cool podcasts. If you're interested in coming out to that, this is a public event, but it is at a private address. So I'm not going to publicly disclose that, but you know how to get a hold of me. Shoot me a message and I will let you know where it's at and give you more details about it. You can also look it up on Facebook. There is a event page for the event. It is Podcast Night at the Tolma, Tolma. Check it out. I'm really looking forward to it. You should be too if you're in or around the Pittsburgh area. Next Friday, January 25th. Is that Friday? I believe it's Friday. I don't think it's Saturday. Whatever the 25th is, that's what day. And speaking of shows, I got a couple other shows coming up besides that. I don't know if I have any listeners in the Michigan area, but Grey Walker is going to be spending a couple days out in the Midwest. February 1st, we'll be in Lansing with our friends Heartsick. It's their album release. We're going to be at the Loft. If you're in the area, come out. The day after that, February 2nd, we'll be with Heartsick again in Grand Rapids, Michigan at Mulligan's. We played there last year. It was a really cool spot. Really happy to be back there. And February 8th, Sikes and the New Violence headlining gig at the Smiling Moose in the South Side, Pittsburgh, PA. That's going to be with my friends and guests of the show, BB Guns and Walkman, who has also been on the show, and Abstract Theory, who have not been on Start the Beat yet, but they will be eventually. It's a really cool lineup of all hip-hop acts. It's very rare for me to play an all hip-hop show. I put this bill together. I really stand behind all of the artists on this bill. I think they're all crazy talented, awesome performers, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if you want to see some cool hip-hop, that's it. February 8th, The Smiling Moose, Sikes and the New Violence, BB Guns, Walkman, Abstract Theory. Come out to that. There's more info about it online. Yes. Moving on. Let's see. Addressing the future of the show, the future of Start the Beat. We're into the new year. Been trying out some new things with the show. Still haven't really received any local music submissions. I really haven't been asking outside of the show. Maybe I'll do some posts outside of the podcast to try to get some stuff on the show. If you want your music played, let me know. I'm more than happy to start sharing some stuff in that format through this platform. Still haven't had any bites on any sponsors or anything yet. That's okay. I don't really need it. I'll live. I had some people reach out to me and tell me that the Patreon was a bad idea because they think it's kind of lame. And that's kind of the same boat I was in too, so it's probably not going to happen because whatever. What do I need money for? All this stuff is free, right? I didn't have to pay anything for this gear. I don't have to pay anything to host a podcast. My time isn't worth anything. So yeah, fuck a Patreon, I guess. Moving on. Last episode that was posted was me answering a bunch of listener questions, which is actually a ton of fun. I do want to do that again. So if you have any other topics or questions that you would like to hear me discuss in this format, feel free to keep them coming. And I will eventually get to answering them in at a later date if you feel that, my input is important when it comes to anything. And yeah, I think without further ado, we're going to get into this week's episode, which is actually part 2 of my conversation with my friend Sid Riggs. If you haven't listened to part 1, it's in the backlog. It's a couple episodes ago. Go check it out. It's a really cool conversation about the music industry, Sid's experience working with bands, playing in bands, being a part of the music scene in the Los Angeles area for some time. Some pretty cool stories, and part 2 digs more into all of that. So if you want to listen to part 1 first, go back and check that out. If you just feel like dealing with part 2, that's cool too. Whatever you want to do. You're an adult or soon to be an adult, or even if you're not an adult, you could do whatever you want. It's your life. Live it how you want. You don't need to do things in order. You are your own boss. It's 2019. Yes. Whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. I think I've rambled far enough. So let me shut up and let's get into this week's episode. Sit back, relax, and let's start the motherfucking beat.
Well,
entertainment, right?
If you're into music and you have an affinity for vinyl, like when you were a kid, then having a record store would be awesome. When I was a kid, it was in a time period where the only thing there was like Cream magazine, Rolling Stone. There was no MTV. There was no internet. So the only way to get in contact with music was just to go to a record store.
Yeah.
And I would hop on my bike and I would go to like the 5 record stores that I could ride my bike to. And I would ride to that, to the first record store one day. And I would start at A and just look through every single record in the entire store. And I go, that one's new. What's this? Like in my head, I had a catalog of every store. I go, what's new? What is it? And I would check it out. Like, doesn't look interesting. Keep going B, C, D. There's a new one. What's this?
Yeah.
And that's how I found music. I would just go to the record store, and that was my life.
It wasn't much different for me, luckily enough. I had an uncle that was a big record collector, and my dad was really into heavy metal and stuff. So I got to be around a lot of music and go to the record stores and, magazines. The internet was barely a thing. Mm-hmm. And like sampler CDs and magazines, finding out about bands and then trying to find those CDs in the CD stores growing up. I grew up around the same thing. There was no, by the time right around the time I graduated high school was about the same time that like downloading music online was a thing. Like the Napster and LimeWire, all that stuff was really taking off around that time. So, but by then, I already had like 18 years of record stores in my brain. So that's how I've always interacted with it. Uh-huh. It's so interesting now with record stores. It seems that a lot of younger kids are just looking for like, Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. They might be into that. But if they're not
good for them.
No, that's good. But
yeah.
If they're not into that, I don't know if they're into buying physical media. Mm-hmm. New artists do put out music, but it might be kind of an ironic thing for a young girl to be like, oh, I'm going to college and I want a record player for my dorm, and they got this Taylor Swift record. I'm really generalizing here, but what? Yeah. I feel like that person definitely exists.
Yeah, they've been to Urban Outfitters and they saw, wow, you can buy a record player and then have it turn a record into a MP3 for my phone.
So. So it's. I think a lot of those are kind of the biggest demographics of people that I feel are buying records now. People that are buying them just to have like that Taylor Swift record in the crate, in their college dorm.
Yeah.
Or like the young kids that are just, they want to, I don't know, I want a Beatles record or Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd. That's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't get into the Beatles all that much when I was young, but even though I say that, when I was real young, my mom took me to the library and we didn't have any money. So buying records was difficult. So we went to the library one day and she said to me, you can check records out like books. I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
I remember hearing, yeah.
And so like I went on, that was totally foreign to me. So they had like turntables and headphones in the library, and I got Sergeant Pepper's and I put it on, like, and I don't even know why I chose that. I was so young, and I like put that on, like, and I just listened to the whole thing, both sides, like, that's amazing. And it just blew my mind. I checked it out for 2 weeks and listened to it, nonstop for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But then shortly thereafter, I think I kind of I kind of got into Kiss. So my what could have been like a fascination with the Beatles quickly turned into a fascination with Peter Criss and Ace Frehley. And then I'm all in on Kiss.
My uncle that was the big record collector, he was a huge Stones guy. There was a little bit of Beatles floating around, but he was definitely on like the Stones camp
of
bad things,
boys,
And my dad was all about, like, I always say the 3Ms, Maiden, Metallica, Megadeth. Like, that was his shit. He was like an 80s thrash dude. He was, my mom was like 16 when she had me. Dad was like 17, 18. So I'm 4 or 5 years old. My dad's in his early 20s. And it's just like, it makes sense. Like,
totally.
Long hair, thrash metal. Like,
yeah, you're just 100%. Like growing up listening to Number of the Beast.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Actually, there's a really funny story where my first grade picture, my dad tried to send me to school like in a Trooper t-shirt, Iron Maiden Trooper shirt.
Did you get in trouble for that or something?
No, my mom caught him and then ended up swapping out the shirt. I was like, man, that would have been so sick. But I do have my my senior photo. I finally got a senior photo or a school photo in wearing I'm actually wearing a Number of the Beast shirt in my senior photo.
That's the one to wear.
Yeah.
Of all of them. To me, in my mind.
Yeah.
Everything after that is cool, but Number of the Beast is the one.
No, I like Number of the Beast. Peace of Mind's probably my I would say my top notch Maiden album, but that's, I mean, hey, we're splitting hairs. Well, that whole era, I think, is.
Well, I was listening to Maiden, like Killers and whatever the record, whatever, which one of those two?
Yeah, the self-titled and Killers, the Paul Di'Anno years.
Yeah. I was listening to those before Number of the Beast, and when I was a kid, like in high school. And I remember, Maiden got a new singer, and I didn't know what to think of that. And then I heard that fucking Number of the Beast track, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? That is the baddest ass thing I've ever. I just played it over and over and lived it. So to me, like I have like that. That's like one of those heartstrings.
Yeah,
like Number of the Beast.
There was something about early Maiden, and it had this. There was something about the power of like they've always been great songwriters, but I feel like as they got more technically proficient, it kind of snuck into the songwriting and things got like more progressive, and it changed the band in some ways for the worst. I especially think like in later years now, like, I don't know, we're talking like over a 30, 40 year arc, right? What do you expect, like, them to do?
To maintain awesomeness that
long.
But
there is something about that early Maiden that's almost like the adolescent kind of, I don't want to say punk tendency, but it kind of had like
if metal can have punk rock, then that was like punk metal.
You could tell they were definitely from England. Like it had that.
Yeah, it was like tough sounding. It didn't. It just sounded like some dude would hit you in the head, like in the face, and just be dirty and have like one tooth. And I was like, yeah, those guys are badass.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of the Di'Anno stuff when I was a kid, but as my tastes evolved, it's like I learned to appreciate the early stuff for what it was and just how, like, I don't know, it was just grimy.
Grimy is a good word for it. And I like to look back at records like that and just think, what was going on at that time period that band wrote that set of music? Like, there was no one else writing like that before.
Totally.
And then there's some dudes, some like 21-year-old kids in a basement someplace just pulling that out of their ass. And you're like, fuck yeah, dudes, that is rad. And so I always hope that just for music in general, that at any given time, there's some 16-year-old kids just learning how to play their instruments that are so fed up with all of the bullshit that's, it's being foisted down their throat. That's just kind of like whatever, that they're just going to invent some kind of new version of something that's already there. And it's just going to blow up and you're going to be like, fuck, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Where did you pull that one out? Killer. And I think of bands like Nirvana, maybe like, Van Halen one, and, are examples of that. Like, who the fuck was doing that then? It's killer.
Yeah, I think that I'm finally starting to see this interest in young kids about being open to different sounds and new things in music, which I think is fascinating because for a while it felt like everybody just wanted to hear more of the same.
Mhm.
It seemed like new ideas were too challenging in the mainstream, and now I feel like we're in this this time period where nobody really knows quite what's working. So a lot of people were throwing a lot of really weird stuff at the wall, and nothing's quite sticking yet. But I think that pretty soon we'll see something new that's gonna be like, whoa, didn't see that coming. I'm
Well,
excited for it.
when you threw the phrase mainstream in there, it made me think: is there really even a mainstream music now? Because mainstream used to, like, what mainstream would have been in the past would have been the radio stations, kind of in collaboration with MTV, and that created the mainstream.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But there really isn't a mainstream now. So now everyone's just kind of like the life rafts are all drifting in opposite directions, and someone's trying to figure out how to get a paddle to work.
Yeah.
And maybe that's good. At least it's better than everybody doing the exact same thing over and over again.
Yeah. I've always listened to, I've never been the type of person that was, oh, fuck popular music or fuck what's on MTV. I grew up around that stuff.
Oh, me too.
But I've always been interested in underground bands as well. I was listening to weird, crazy grindcore death metal stuff in, middle school, high school, but still like, okay, Slipknot's fucking sweet too. Like
Yeah.
I liked all of it. And because of that, I feel like I'm always really just happy to see other people that maybe don't have such an underground listening, people that just listen to like very surface level what's on the radio
just
stuff.
coming at 'em.
I'm excited just to see that landscape of whatever is on the radio being so diverse. It's very interesting to me. It's very unpredictable. I like whenever I'm listening to like local rock radio and there's a song on, I'm like, why are they playing this? I know it's like some people might get mad about it, but for me, I'm like, this is really interesting. Why are they playing this? Is this rock music now? Or is this just like a desperate attempt to get people that don't listen to their station normally to listen to it?
Yeah,
or is this just like really challenging the status quo?
Does the DJ get 2 spins an hour and this is the one that he chose?
Yeah.
However that works. I don't even know anymore at radio what that even looks like. So yeah, who knows? But I have hope for music. There's it's got pretty grim there for a little while. Just every record, physically, literally sounded the same song structure, same concept for what the lyrics are about. In rock music.
Yeah, I feel like with a lot of rock music, guitar driven music, metal, it started to like these albums or these bands were kind of like just more run-of-the-mill Chinese restaurants opening up. Like they all have the same menu and the same food. They're like, I know what this is.
It's like, it's good. I got a hankering for some Kung Pao chicken right now. I'm going to go put that CD on. That's cool. I feel satisfied. Okay, and now I can go do something else.
Yeah, but it doesn't like really resonate much more past that.
Yeah.
And, you being somebody that has spent time behind the production board in studios recording bands, you've probably saw this evolution happen from a behind the curtain standpoint.
For sure. Yeah. I saw a lot of conversations behind the scenes, like decision making that would go on that in hindsight, you're like, yeah, that's, I don't agree with that. And sometimes you're not in a position really to say anything. If you're an engineer on a record, it's really not your position to go in and say, hey, producer and A&R guy and president of label, you guys are all out of your gourds,
Yeah.
You're making a dumb decision here. That's lame. But as an engineer, you're just like, my job is to get great tones and engineer this record and just, get some free lunch out of the deal. But you don't have much input after that. And you probably shouldn't. That's what the producer's for. He's the ringleader.
Yeah. I've been really fascinated, particularly in metal, with how we may have talked about this before, but we didn't have microphones recording, so
Mhm.
we may have a repeat conversation. And I
Good.
apologize.
No, that's fine.
I've been really fascinated with how advancements in recording technology
Mhm.
has forced heavy metal to evolve.
Where do you
Or
see
do
that
you think
happen?
that it's a reverse where like because with heavy metal everybody wants to be faster, louder, more technically crazy.
Mhm.
And I don't think, are you familiar with bands like I don't know, like Rings of Saturn?
I've
Have you
heard of a lot of those bands, but I
Yeah.
haven't heard
Well, they're like
many
these
of those
crazy
bands.
technical, we'll just say like technical death metal, very
Mhm.
technical, progressive, heavy metal.
Mhm.
I don't think it would have been like really possible to record those bands 25 years ago and get it to sound the way that it needs to.
Well,
Versus
25 years ago, you wouldn't have had Pro Tools, and Pro Tools makes that possible. And I don't mean that's not disparaging to Pro Tools. It's awesome. That's the system. That's my
Yeah.
DAW that I work. But Pro Tools allows you to go in there and do 57 passes in playlists,
Yeah.
edit comp everything together, and then once you're there, then edit it,
But
on a DI,
totally.
lock it up to a grid.
Yeah, so like I think for a while, we'll say in the 2000s was when it started to get like crazy, and then you're hearing these albums that are just they're almost heavy metal albums in that time frame. I view them more as like electronic music albums.
Yeah, because they
in a
are
sense.
really they are totally.
But what happened that's really cool now, where we're coming into 2019, it's been a couple decades of this really crazy produced metal. You're starting to see these kids on like YouTube that are growing up around this, and they think that playing like that is normal. So
Mhm.
you're seeing these prodigy guitar players
Yeah.
that are like, and when they're young and developing, they're forcing themselves to learn how to play these things that I don't even think the people that played those records even played.
Mhm.
Like it was all digitally touched up to make it sound perfect.
Well-
and now these kids are like, well, they played it, so now I need to play it. And you have these crazy talented young bands now that they have the talent to play and the technology to make it sound even better. And it's just continuing to evolve everything. And that's what I'm talking about.
Well, one of the things that I think about, I mean, you said the YouTube kids, they grow up in an era where anywhere on YouTube you can learn how to play anything.
Yeah.
But if you go back 25 years, there was no internet. There was no kid sitting in his bedroom in Des Moines, Iowa, watching videos of his favorite guitar players, showing him all the techniques on how to be really good.
Totally.
He was just learning how to do it, clunking over and maybe getting a little bit better, but not getting very far. And maybe having little, bursts of getting better, but just by diligently practicing. Now, and it's great. I think it's awesome. Now, if you're learning how to play an instrument, you just live in your bedroom on YouTube, just learning how to play everything. And instead of like fighting it out, trying to figure out how to do it right and making mistakes with technique or, and that would slow you down. Now you can just go, boom, it's right there. Like that's how you do it right. And you just that was 6 months of drudgery that I learned in 5 minutes.
The only problem with that though is the potential risk of not developing your own voice.
Sure.
Because
absolutely.
you just have all of these kids learning from each other. And I think a big part of it's like being an artist or even a chef, it's like you can cook from a recipe or draw, learn how to do proper shading, but without your own technique, it's hard to create something that's really your own. And sometimes it's those struggles that give you that voice.
I agree totally. And with like proficiency in music, I think it reaches a critical mass to where it really just doesn't matter anymore.
No.
How much faster is a fast double bass riff? How much faster is a shredding lead? Does it even really matter? It's cool that kids can do it, but really in the end of the day, the kid who's going back to buy the Beatles record or the Pink Floyd record, there's not a single shred on any of any. It's just like that's emotion and it's vibe, and it feels emotional and vibey, and I think that it's like the critical mass. Maybe music always goes like way over here, and then people just get tired of it, and it pushes like something blows up over here that is the complete antithesis, and then that gets passe, and then it blows it up all the way over here. So maybe what happens is all these these guys just shredding out of there'll always be somebody left doing the previous thing. that maybe people just get, okay, it just doesn't matter anymore. You know, like if I can play 5 BPM faster than the guy before me, it just doesn't matter. And maybe it opens up to just cooler songwriting, and then somehow sneaking the the shreddery into there.
I think that it's just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it
Mm-hmm.
or do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like, I could talk like this, but it doesn't mean I should talk like this all the time.
Yeah.
You know, right? People are like,
Or you
"Why
can talk
the
really
fuck-"
fast. Yeah.
Yeah, like, why the fuck is he doing that,
Yeah.
right? Because I can. But like, I don't know. Like, don't do that.
I've always personally enjoyed music that just has more of a vibe, that's just cool sounding, and that's not always heavy metal. Like I like all kinds of things. My favorite
Absolutely.
artist right now is probably Saint Vincent.
Yeah.
But like I like everything from like Portishead to to Meshuggah. Just throw something in the middle there. If it's a good version of it, I probably like it.
Yeah.
It could be anything. But I always tend to like things more that just have a vibe and just have a cool vibe.
I think that that's really important when it comes to songwriting. Is just like what vibe or what atmosphere am I trying to put the listener in with this song?
Yeah.
I think that sometimes being a songwriter, it's really easy for like ego to get in the way and just be like, oh, I have this big point that I want to make, or I just want to do something that's really heavy and going to get people charged up, which I guess is a vibe, to be fair. So
Sure.
maybe I should take that one back. But I think that there's just like there's a nuance that goes into it where I think that you need to be very just selfless in a way with writing music. But I mean, obviously it needs to be somehow selfish or not. I don't know. I never really thought about this in this way. So I'm kind of working it out in my brain.
I do that all the time.
But yeah, that's just, I think being less, I'm just going to leave it at for now. I think being less selfish when creating art leads to a better product.
Well, maybe it's this, and I'm trying to work it out too right now. Maybe it's if you lack a really good ability to write a good song. Yeah, and what is a good song anyway? You and I are going to have differing opinions on that. But if you're not very good at writing songs, then you have to compensate with riffery and shreddery. And if that's how you write a song, then that's all you got. And until you can figure out a way to write a chord structure and a riff and simple it down and have it still have just as much impact, that's like the craft of songwriting.
Sure. The thing that, oh man, I get it. You get it a lot with metal, and I definitely went through my progressive metal phase, and there are still some bands that I think are great, but I also am such a stickler for song structure. And there's a lot of stuff that I see. It happens a lot in metal where it's just like heavy part into heavy part into heavy part. And it's just like, you're not like, these are just parts.
Yeah. Well,
but it's like, I guess it's a composition technically, but like, I don't know. I just want a fucking song.
Well, I think that heavy part should open up into something a little more open.
Dynamics.
Whatever that looks like, a
Yeah.
heavy song is going to look different than in a ballad. But, something like your meat riff, like your hook, which is, where the crowd is on fire. And then you settle down into a verse where the vocal can take over, but it's still interesting and cool. And then back into a heavy riff, like it's got to go like from here to here. It's got to take me like my mind on a journey. If it's just like for 5 minutes straight from like, getting pummeled on this side of my head and then getting pummeled over here and then getting pummeled under here.
And, I think you have a lot of musicians too. I mean, I've played in metal bands for a good chunk of time now where it's always an issue with guitar players that it's like, you do understand there's other people in this band,
But
like
you could say that for a metal drummer too.
Totally. It's like, we gotta figure out how to like, it's like everybody wants to be on 100 at all the time to, really showcase their ability. And, you get that thing where it's like, well, this is kind of easy to play. So, it's not technical enough. So it's not good. And it's like, you're out of your fucking mind. If it's easy for you to play, that means cool. If it's easy to play and it sounds good, let's roll with it because
that means it's easy to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And
that means we could play it live and we can record it easily. And
but also it means that the other 95% of metal fans who aren't the world's best shredding guitar players are probably going to like it. it's gonna hit them in the
That's-
chest, and it's gonna be a riff that sounds fuck yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then come out of it, go into a solo, and fucking just rip the shit
And
out of it.
That goes back into, being not so selfish when songwriting, kind of the thought that I was having earlier. Because I think a lot of that wanting to be very just flashy in your songwriting. Well, I mean, I'm into that just as much as anybody else when it's tasteful. A lot of the time it's just like, I want to show everybody how good I am at my thing. And it's like, that's cool. But if it's, I don't know, if you put a piece of gold in a pile of shit, it's still like, nobody's going to want to touch it.
Well, I think like I'm into hooks. Like I want something to hook me.
Yeah.
But when I say hooks, I mean, I don't mean like, Taylor Swift hooks. I mean like a Slayer hook is still a hook, and a Pat Benatar hook is a hook.
Yeah.
Every version of a band has hooks. So I'm just into hooks. Like I want to hear something and just go, fuck yeah, I can, like, I'm going to turn that song off and I'm going to still hear that fucking riff in my head. And I won't have to hear it 75 times to understand what the hell is going on. I just go, that was fucking badass, man. And that's a hook to me.
Yeah.
And I'm into hooks. So, if it's a heavy band and they've got like one rad hooky riff that's kick ass and just like face melting, I'm into it. But it's got to be a hook. It's got to be hooky. Like I still want it to hook me in.
Yeah. It's like chocolate chip cookie is good. But the bites that have the little extra bit of chocolate in it are like, yeah, that's the fucking bite. But you want the whole cookie. You don't want just one. You don't want the bite that's just the good bite, because that good bite isn't as good without the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, so what would you think are maybe like some of like the most seminal metal tracks of all time? Like, what would you think they are? And not from the from the kid who's in his basement, this has to be the most progressive thing in the world, but like just in general, what would you think some of them are? I'm only asking to prove a point.
That's a hard question. There are some things that definitely come to mind. Raining Blood,
yeah,
is one. Probably The Trooper is one, or Run to the Hills, like a lot of that classic Maiden stuff.
Yeah, maybe like Enter
Breaking
Sandman,
the Law.
yeah. But my point, all of those songs, there's kind of a riff there that you can walk away remembering.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that have stood the test of time, that we can still refer to them. And those are the ones that are filling stadiums for Slayer still. And, and Maiden can pack an arena still. It's because of those. It's really because they were writing kick-ass metal tracks, but they had hooks in them, in their version of a hook.
Yeah.
They weren't trying to like throw a Taylor Swift into the middle of a Slayer song.
Well, I think that what makes people connect with music is just that ability to have something that hooks them and sticks with them and they can relate to, and something they think is catchy and they can just hum along and go to a show and like, yeah. Sometimes the stuff gets a little bit too crazy. I think there are definitely people that find crazy stuff catchy. Well, there's some people whose brains work like that, but if we're just talking, they're
in general,
it's a smaller pocket. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that, I guess the point that I'm thinking in my head is like, if you're genuinely wanting to make this crazy, progressive, all over the place stuff, and that's like your passion, great. But there are some times when I just come across bands where it just feels like, oh, this is just like a total wank fest, and I don't understand. I don't see the appeal.
Yeah. Oh, I don't like. I'm not a huge fan of wank fest, but I do. I just realized as I was saying that, it kind of might have sounded like a curmudgeon, but I'm not at all. I do appreciate guys who can just shred the fuck out of shit, because I was as a performer, as a drummer, I was never like a shredding, I was never good at it. So maybe I'm a little bit bitter because guys could just kill me. And that's not really it. It's just I ended up playing in a way I wanted to hear. Like that's the kind of drumming I like to hear on tracks I liked. So I played the way I like to hear. Like I played what I wanted to hear. So I'm going to play that. I like the way that sounds.
And also in a time, because I mean, you mentioned before to me, you haven't played drums in a band. It's been like over a decade now, maybe longer, I'm guessing.
I haven't played a live show since 2002.
Okay.
So
that's been some time,
17 years almost.
So like, I'm curious about like, what was some of the most, I guess there was some people probably doing some pretty crazy stuff drum wise back then. Like, I think crazy drumming was something that was a lot more relevant before crazy guitar playing became a thing, at least in heavy music.
Well, like when I grew up, like Rush, Neil Peart, like I grew up on Bonham and Neil Peart, and then those are my guys, and Ian Pace from Deep Purple, but it was really Bonham and Neil Peart, and so Neil Peart was like pushing the envelope then. Now when you listen to Neil Peart, you're like, oh, it's pretty standard, it's pretty rudimentary, but at the time it was really going forward.
Yeah,
but then I kind of like backed into just loving playing just big, fat, hard beats. And so that's just, like I ended up being way more of a Bonham drummer than I ever was a Neil Peart drummer. And all of the bands I was in, that was perfect because that's exactly what it needed to be. It didn't need me to be something else. Even when I was playing with Halford's band, we had done the 2 record, and we were going back in the studio to write new songs, and we weren't going to do another version of a 2 record. It was going to be Halford. The name 2 was going to go away. John 5 had joined Manson at the time, and so it was just going to be, we were bringing in new guitar players, and it was going to be a brand new band. It was just going to be called Halford. It was going to be heavy again.
Yeah,
and it was gonna, it was gonna be, it was gonna be Scott Travis drumming, which is really not the kind of drumming I do. I just do a totally different thing. And at that same time period, I had an opportunity to join Sinistar, which was going to be, eventually signing with Geffen Records. So, I just went, well, I'm going to go do Sinistar, and because I get to play like I want to, as opposed to me being able to play Scott Travis drumming, but it's not really what I naturally do.
yeah.
So I just told Rob, you should find a drummer who naturally plays like that, as opposed to just bending me into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go do this thing that I think is really rad. And you should get a guy who thinks that kind of drumming is rad, and everyone will win there.
I know it's something that a lot of people probably don't notice, but I can sense when somebody is playing something that's not in their wheelhouse.
Oh yeah, totally.
Like, even if they are playing the songs technically, it's just, there's something about like their posture and like their overall like essence where it's like, oh, this is not what you do.
It's like going to see a cover band.
Sure.
You listen to the 4 sets of them doing someone else's music, and you go, you did a proficient job of recreating every one of those songs, but at no point was it exciting at all.
Uh-huh.
It was just like I could yawn through all of that.
Yeah. Just like the uncertainty and uncomfortableness and just like lack of form.
A lack of giving a fuck too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm just going through the rote motion. You're supposed to do this thing here, then you hit that thing here, and then you do a fill that goes like that. I don't really care for that fill. Well, that's what the song calls for.
Uh-huh.
Versus like, I love every single hit I'm doing here, whether it's, just straight, whether it's Phil Rudd from AC/DC, or,
How do you feel about AC/DC drum? The rhythm section of AC/DC.
You know what? On the way over here, literally, I was listening to Highway to Hell. Coming up the hill. I was listening to Highway to Hell. But I think that's great. To me, a good drummer is a drummer that if you take him out of the band and replace him with somebody else, the band falls apart.
Oh, yeah.
So Charlie Watts and the Rolling Stones, if you put another drummer in there, the Stones fall apart. It's not the Stones anymore. If you put Neil Peart in AC/DC, it would sound retarded. And if you put Phil Rudd in Rush, it would sound ridiculous. So
absolutely.
To me, a good drummer is a guy who literally brings something to that band that if you pulled him out, it would all be whacked. It wouldn't work anymore.
Uh-huh.
So that's a good drummer to me. And a guy like Phil Rudd from AC/DC in that rhythm section, those guys are solid. They can't not do what they do and have AC/DC work. If they do anything other than what they do, AC/DC doesn't work.
Yeah, I love the power of restraint that band has held for their entire fucking career.
Yeah.
Like it's so awesome.
And just the precision of those 2 rhythm guitar players playing together. I mean, obviously
they're locked in.
I mean, they've been playing together their whole lives, and it just sounds great.
There's another thing, like a lot of people say the same thing about Metallica and just how well they lock in live, and just the little just nuances of just groove changes and things. They're just fucking on it.
Yeah, when you play with the same guys forever, and even if that drummer is Lars, but you learn to wiggle in and out of that, and it sounds cool. And even if he's playing drum fills where you're like, what song are you playing? Are you playing the same songs as everybody else?
I also think there's an interesting thing in like how transparent a band like AC/DC is in a live environment.
Mhm.
Where say there's a band that's playing faster, heavier, louder. If there's a flub,
Yeah,
you can skate by it a lot of the time. But if there's a flub in an AC/DC set, I'm sure that shit fucking sticks out like a goddamn fucking sore thumb, man.
You shouldn't be flubbing those tracks. Speaking of things but I almost I'm so bit my tongue to say I almost said speaking of things that are easy to play, but they're not easy to play. They're easy to play the notation like kick, snare, but there's a pocket like that Phil Rudd pocket. It's almost impossible. It's like trying to play Bonham. You can play all the same notes. You can hit but it doesn't sound like Bonham. It doesn't sound like him.
Yeah, there's nuances in like the velocity of your hits. It's almost like you need
the hi-hat, the way the hi-hat is slightly behind the kick and snare, and everything's just dragging a little bit, and then it pushes here. Like you can't. He can't. That's how he plays.
Yeah,
he's not trying to do that. He just naturally does
that. It's his natural voicing.
He can't not do that. So it works perfect for him.
And I feel like you would almost need to be like in like some sort of a trance almost to kind of just lock into like those rhythms that are very, I don't know, if I were to picture myself behind a drum kit playing, it would be so hard for me to not want to like throw in some extra little flares or things to keep myself entertained. But
there is a kind of my style when I was playing and the bands I was in was, it wasn't tons of drum fills. It was like lock into a pocket and I play hard, lock into a pocket, fills were appropriate when they were appropriate, but it is kind of like that. You kind of lock into a thing like, and your whole body is like kind of churning in something that you're doing. And it is kind of like locking into a trance.
Yeah. That's how I imagine it must be for, Thomas from Meshuggah.
Yeah, that guy. I was listening to that earlier too.
Other level, like it's so fascinating. Watching them live is just very, I imagine seeing them live that I would just be like, oh, this is awesome, just kind of like this. But no, I was like eyes open, just like the whole time.
I watch videos of him playing online.
Like I was like, wow. Like,
I watch videos of him playing online and it looks so effortless for him. But then I listened to him in an interview and he was talking about one of the tracks on one of their records. It was kind of one of their premiere tracks. I can't remember which one it was. And he said it took him 6 months to learn how to play it good. Like he came up with the part and it took him 6 months of straight practicing to get it good enough to play it on a record. And so then when you see him just playing it, it just looks effortless and it's all, whatever the hell those rhythms are, but they all tie together with his right hand. Like everything ties together on that right hand and everything else is moving around. And that's the thing that holds everything together. And, but you just watch it go, that doesn't even look like, I see exactly what he's doing there. But it's still whacked out.
Yeah, it's more of a numbers thing, and I think like making your brain count in a way that it might not normally count, is what I think is really fascinating about Meshuggah, because I think that there isn't a whole lot of like crazy fast things or technical fills. It's very, when things are happening, there's only like a few instruments or a few drums kind of like being hit. It's not over the top.
Yeah,
but it's the counting that's...
He's not wailing down a tom, or if he's got one rack tom and two floors. And
the counting, and I think it's the repetitiveness, like the tranceness of those things. I think that being able to lock into that weird count and keep it up consistently for as long as they do, because they have like some very long songs.
Well, what
makes it like the stamina is what I find impressive.
Well, they do a weird count and then they change the count. So like one little passage is one count, and the next one is a different one, and then it goes back to the first count, then it goes to a different count, and then it does the first count twice again. It's like they're all in and out. They're all like weaving in and out.
They still have an interesting way of being able to bring parts back around, create hooks in their own way, and have like a solid song structure. It's not just like part, crazy. It all ends up making sense at the end.
Yeah, I like that band a lot. I think they're really cool. They're fun to listen to. But they actually, they overwhelm me after a while. I can only
Oh,
listen to
totally.
for about 20 minutes.
Sure.
Like if I'm in my car, I turn it up and it sounds great in my car stereo. I'm like, fuck, this is badass sounding. And then after about 20 minutes, I'm like, I'm going to get in a car wreck. I got to turn this off.
Yeah. Like, when we saw them, it was just like feeling it like in your chest. It was a very intense experience.
I'd like to see
I
them.
haven't had a whole lot of live experiences like that, but they were definitely one of those bands that was like, this is otherworldly. Like I feel this is what a live performance is about.
That's cool.
But what's so interesting though is that like there could be a band just as good as them, right? Playing the same songs, but if it wasn't in the right live environment, you know, like in a room surrounded with subs and all this stuff, it wouldn't translate in the same way, which is like a really interesting thing, kind of where we're at with Greywalker right now. In playing shows and being picky and choosy about shows we play, which I think is normal for bands, but we're kind of picky about venues because I've come to notice this thing where if we're playing a place where there isn't a stage or a good PA, it doesn't come off right. It's like there are some bands that thrive in that environment. But for us, it's like you're not getting the right representation. It just ends up looking weird. It looks like this cheap dollar store version of what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I think you're right to feel that way, and I think you're right to want to have your band be represented as well as possible. You know, I don't agree with bands' mentalities where, you know, like where they almost think it's a bad thing to want to push and be better and, you know, get good and you know, and rise and you become the cream of the crop, so to speak. I mean, some bands they almost think that that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
like, no, that's the good thing.
I don't think it's so much that. I mean, I agree with that, but I also think it's a thing where it's just like, you know, understanding where your place is as a band and how you want to be represented. Because like I'm a huge fan of like grimy punk stuff. I don't want to see grimy punk stuff on a big stage with nice lights. Like I want to see that, in the venue with, you know, the not so great PA on a floor. I want that to be like sweaty and in my face, but that's not exactly what Greywalker is. And I don't know if a lot of people think about those differences all the time and like how the places they're choosing to play, how that's like representing their whole band. And like,
I think bands
for people that have never seen you before.
Well, that's a great point right there. Because I talk to young bands all the time when I was producing records, and even now when I'm developing bands, and I say, and I just had this conversation with some guys who were just getting ready to leave for tour. Like they were leaving my studio, they're going on tour the next day. And I said, hey guys, like one word of advice before you leave is that you're going to go play a tour. You may play someplace where there's 20 people and 10 of them are the staff of the bar. But you've got to play your best set you've ever played for those 20 people, because that's the only time they're ever going to see you.
Yeah.
And you've got to give every show all you've got. There's no throwaway shows ever. If you're out playing live, you are performing possibly for the first time that someone's ever going to see you. And if you just phone it in, you're like, there's only 10 people here. Fuck it. We don't really care.
No,
you will suck. They will think you suck. You will never, you'll have lost a fan.
Yeah. You
always have to play and choose your venues to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Always, no matter who is there, no matter how dead or rowdy the crowd is, you've got to crush it. You got to know that you're trying your hardest at every single gig.
On tour, it can be hard, especially if you're up and coming, to really pick and choose your venues. But if you do have the opportunity to do so, like we do locally, I think it's really crucial. But, you know, again, if you're touring and you're playing to, 15 people, I think that you want those people to leave, like telling their friends, like, oh, you fucked up not coming to that show.
That's exactly. You want them to say, dude, man, I saw this band. They crushed it. There was only 15 people there, and they played like it was 150,000.
Yeah.
They were bad. They were badass, crushing it, man. I will totally go see them again. That's what you got to leave people with, that no matter where you're playing. And you can never phone gigs in ever, 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 especially when you're a younger band. Because that's the one and last chance you're going to get to play for whatever people are in that room.
It's interesting. There's a lot of talk that comes up in the local scene here, and I'm sure it's not much different in other towns, but just underground thing where people are talking about venues and how like, oh, I don't want to play this place because of X, Y, and Z. And I guess I'm kind of doing that right now. But the thing that always fascinates me is about like how some bands come up, because sure, I think we have a good punk scene because there's a lot of venues that can facilitate it. We have a good hardcore scene because there are venues that can facilitate it. And the metal scene's like, they're good metal bands, but I don't think we necessarily have the strongest metal scene because there isn't really the right venue for it. And then I think more about like even like say bands that what they want to do is radio rock. Like there's a band that wants to be the next, I don't know.
That wants to be the next Nickelback.
Sure.
Yeah.
Where do they start?
Mhm.
Bars? Is that it? Like how do you like a band that's like a big production
If
rock
you-
band that needs that big stage to get their thing across?
Well, again, if I met some guys and they wanted to do that, like we really want to be, the next Three Doors Down or next Nickelback or plug in your next whatever band, I would say, well, you get first off, you need crushing radio songs. You need so you need to be writing. Don't even worry about playing gigs. You
Yeah.
just need to be writing. You need to be recording. And until you get those crushing radio songs, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your live show is, because you don't have the crushing radio songs to go be Nickelback anyway.
Yeah. That's
So you need to be writing. And once you get a handful, maybe 4, pretty good songs where you're like, those are good, then you would need to get a producer and start working. That's a totally different game. Like you don't come up through the clubs.
Sure.
And that you get a producer, you track those things as good as you can, you hire a lawyer.
Is that something that
you try to get a deal for it, you backdoor it in.
is that something that you like had experience with and saw
Totally.
bands do?
Yeah.
Like even bands that were, we'll just say it like disconnected, like just random dudes that are musicians or ladies, whatever.
Mhm.
That are like, hey, like, you don't know who we are, but this is a band. These are our like kind of our songs. Can we work on something to build this big product?
Well,
Is that do you think that still happens now?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think it does. And the way it happens is if you're a band and you think that you are doing something that really can kind of fit in that niche, what you do is you make some demos that are really good. Then you literally just, the internet is amazing now. You say, what producers produce those Nickelback records? I'm just going to go straight to those guys
Yeah.
and say, hey, what's it cost, to get you to produce one of these tracks and maybe, help us shop a deal. And if we get a deal, then you can produce the record and you get 3 points on the deal and part of the record and you help us get a record deal. And producers do that all the time.
Yeah.
Bands go straight to them, or the band or the producer, in between records. I did it all the time when I was, working professionally. When you're in between, label records, you're looking for a new band to develop, and you're going to help them get a record deal. And then, you get them a record deal, you produce the record, everybody's happy. They get their major deal. You do another record. And we did it all the time. And, bands would come out and hunt us down because of the kind of records we made. Bands that sounded like that would come our way. And,
How often do you think it?
but a lot of times the bands aren't good enough.
Yeah. I was
So,
gonna,
it's not like every band that comes your way, you can go, oh my God, you're going to totally be the next Nickelback.
Yeah, that was
Or
kind of
like-
going to be my question, was going to be like, in your experience, did you see any bands that like were able to kind of follow through with that? Or was it just like bands that almost had it and then just something wasn't quite there?
Mainly the latter.
I imagine that's the majority. I have friends locally and not locally that have, gone out of town to record albums with producers that have worked on bigger rock albums and things like that. And I think that's kind of it. It seems like a lot of the experiences that from people I know that I've talked to that have done that, they are able to, get a hold of the producers or these people and get working with these people. But then it doesn't seem like a lot of the producers have any real interest in actually developing them. It's more or less just like, oh, this is a small paycheck in between other things. Like, I'm going to record your stuff. Here's your songs, put my name on it. But like, there's no real help past that.
In some cases, for sure, that. In other cases, though, producers will, and we did this, me and Bob Marlette did this, where we would find bands, that we would say, you guys are cool, we would like to work with you, think we can help you get a record deal. But what we'll do is we'll just make the record on our dime. You don't pay us anything. we'll make the record, our dime. We'll give you the record, it's yours. We'll shop it and you release it at the same time simultaneously. And we'll split everything 50-50. And so right away, like if you don't know anything about a record deal, you think, wow, 50-50, that's rough. Well, a record deal is 88-12, so 50-50 is a fucking way better split than 88-12 for a band.
Absolutely.
And there's no recouping because we said we'll absorb the cost of making this record. So you sell 10 CDs, the first 10 CDs, that's 10 CDs of sales that we're going to split. And there's no recouping. And we'll try to get we'll try to get it signed. And if we can get it signed, then we'll go in and fix the record, we'll re-record it, and then, and then we'll have a budget there to do some stuff, and we'll split the budget 50-50. And everyone will come out, the record's basically done anyway already. And then you guys are now signed to a major deal, with an 88-12 split. But you got the major deal you were after.
Yeah.
And then, or they would just go out and sell that record on their own and, and split with us 50-50. And so in some instances, that's the kind of deal. I think that's the better model. And I think it's really the better model for the music industry that we live in today. Because if you are a band and your idea, if you still think that the lure of the major record deal is the ultimate game, which it might be for some bands.
Sure.
I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing to do, but realize major label deals like they are now are a whole hell of a lot different than they were 15, 20 years ago. They're 360 deals. The label gets a piece of everything. They get your publishing, some of your merch, some of your live, some, your record royalties, which you were never going to make any money off record royalties really anyway, unless you're Metallica. Like, did you ever see the 30 Seconds to Mars movie? This Will Be War.
No.
This Is War. It's amazing. It's a documentary about them making that record. This Is War. I think that's what it's called. But it's at the same time that they are suing their record label. The label sued them for like $20 million.
Okay.
And then they're countersuing their label. Then at the end, and it just shows how fucked up a major deal is. And at the end, it's like this little blip, they're, kind of at the end of the record, like so-and-so's doing this, so-and-so's doing this, but it's like 30 Seconds to Mars has sold 5 or 6 million records and they still haven't recouped. They're still
that's fucking
underwater
crazy.
To their label.
Yeah, I feel like I can see the 88-12 format working if you're like this huge artist that has huge production costs. Like if you're somebody like a Taylor Swift or something, or Metallica, like you have these stadium tours and like you're on a bus and you got like, there's like so many other people working to make this thing happen. It's not like you're just driving yourselves around in a van across the country. You know what I mean?
You don't even need to be Taylor Swift or Metallica. I mean, you just touring, like when I was in Sinistar, for instance, that band never really blew up, but we were on Geffen Records. We made our record. We went out on tour. We toured a bunch even before our record was out. And, and you don't make any money touring. You're on a major label. You got a bus and two dudes on a road crew and a tour manager who's your front of house guy. So you're taking out 3 guys, 5 dudes in a band, a bus driver. You're in for 10 or 12,000 a week in expenses.
Yeah.
But you're making $150 a night playing a gig. So your label is footing the other bill. That's who's covering that. So even to just tour at the most basic level with a bus and a trailer, without even a gigantic production, just we're going to throw our gear up in front of your gear. We're opening up for you just to take that out with a bus. It's it's $10,000 a week. And so someone's got to pay for that. That's what your label pays for. That's why it's 88-12. Yeah, that just goes on your recoup bill.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. It's like I could see if you're at a level where you need that. But like I think there's still, I feel like there's probably bands now that are driving themselves around that don't have a bus, that are probably stuck in deals like that. And I imagine that's a fucking nightmare.
Well, like we discussed before, I stopped working professionally making records in 2008. And it was really mainly, and I only made records for 6 years as in production and engineering. Yeah. Because before that I was in rock bands. I was in a band with Rob Halford. I was in Sinistar. And in 2002, I played my last gig and I said, I'm going to go do production now, And so only from 2002 to 2008 did I make records. And then in that small window, that was, a couple years after the beginning of Napster, And in that small window, I saw our budgets for label deals. We're going to make a record for a band on a label. That budget's going to be about $500,000. And I saw it go down to like 50,000 for a similar band. And down like 50,000, that's 90% reduction in budget.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And I'm like, fuck this, peace the fuck out.
Because then there's like what's left for you at the end of all that, right?
Really what it was, we were the ones that got paid as the producers. The band got nothing.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you think that you got $500,000 to make a record, and it's 2000 and you got $500,000 to make a record, band's going to take a piece at the top of that, the front end, and they're going to split it as an advance. So say they take $100,000, 5 guys each get $20,000, and you think, well, that's not a ton of money, but it's cool.
You can live off it for
a
a while
year,
while you're recording and writing.
Yeah. And that's the money you're going to have. That's it.
Yeah.
And then you got $400,000 for the record. Your producer's going to get 75. Your engineer's going to get maybe 30. You're going to spend another 100 in studio sunk cost and mixing and everything. So maybe you're $200,000 into the production of your record. Now you're 300 in because you took 100 and 300 and you only have 500 to start with. And you got to make your budget, your video and stuff out of that. And then whatever's left at the end, you get to split it in the back end. But really, so everyone was getting paid. The band was getting some money and the studios were making money. The bands were making money. And now do all of that for 50,000. Like the band gets nothing. There's no front end or back end for the band. It's totally shitty for them.
Like here's $2,000.
Not even
Good luck.
that.
Yeah.
Because if you take $2,000 and give it to the band, then and the band has to make this decision. That's $2,000 less we have to make our record.
Yeah.
And that might be mastering. That could be who knows what it is. But so yeah, that's a rough. Major deals now. Gee, I feel so bad for the bands coming up now. I feel bad and I feel a little bit of solace in that young bands who are like 18 now, they don't really know the lore of what it used to be like. You sign a major deal. That was a major big deal.
Yeah.
And it meant a lot back then. But now you sign a major deal and those days are so long gone, unless you're Taylor Swift or whatever. But for the 99.9% of other bands on major label deals, they're just getting crushed. I don't know how they monetize it anymore. How do you make money? And I know we've had this conversation, like, how does a band make money when nobody buys music? And if nobody's buying music to fill the coffers of a record company, and those coffers then pay for you to tour, how do you go out and tour? How do you go out and do 250 dates a year that you need to do to build a buzz when you can't? Who the hell can afford to go out for 250 dates a year? If you can't afford to even live and eat.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. Probably YouTube is something in there, like some way to monetize YouTube. That's the new MTV. But I don't know. What do you think?
My perspective with the band stuff, I think that's a big part of the reason why Greywalker is where it is. I think that there's this understanding amongst the band that we know that what it would take for us to be able to, do Greywalker full time, given everything else, it's not possible. So, taking a look in the mirror and being like, what do I really want to do? Well, okay, I want to be in a band. I want to play shows. I want to be able to hang out with my best friends. It's like, we could still do all of those things without pushing this full time, because it's also like, well, outside of the band, we have school and houses and families and children and the things that honestly matter in life.
And those are the things
the things that that's the end goal type shit, like that you want to work towards having a good, healthy life, right? And I think for us, being a heavy metal band in our 30s, there's no way for us to really have that same healthy life if we were to tour full time. It's super unfortunate. If we had that opportunity, we'd be, fuck yes, but there's just no way for us to do it. I mean, we go out of town, we do our weekend runs and things like that, and the band breaks even. But we're being very realistic. We're thinking about, okay, like if we're going to have to rent a van for this weekend, how much is that going to cost? Okay, so how many shows are we playing then? make sure we got to make this much money, make sure we bring this much merch. Have we played this place before? Yes. Okay. But we have all the same merch that we had the last time we played. Shit. We should have a new shirt, like
Yeah.
thinking about those kinds of things. And like, so the band does make money. We haven't put any of our own money into anything in a couple years now. Like
That's great. That's
just
cool.
because, but I mean, like we're doing everything. We're not, producing thousands of copies of albums, or we're not driving thousands of miles for shows, but we're doing what we can with what we can and keeping it like positive, and still like it's growing. Like it's a slow thing, but it's working. So we're happy with it. I don't know what other bands do. I think there are some bands I know that just grind. They're just on the road nonstop. Like, they don't have homes. They might not have families, it's just like the home is the road. And I guess like it's really easy to romanticize that lifestyle. And for some people, I think they're into it. But for me, it's like, I don't even know if I would want that life.
Well, if you're 25, that's a lot more appealing than if you're 35.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that like at 35, I wouldn't be wanting to be on tour, but there has to be an end game. If you're going to do 200 shows in a year and you're 35,
yeah,
something has to have happened at the end of that. Like, I brought home enough money after 200 shows to live for 6 months or a year until we do 200 more shows next year. Like, I can't come home with $27 in my pocket after being gone for a year.
But to answer your questions, I realized that I kind of sidestepped that about bands making money. I think the ability to self-monetize now is what is being very, very financially beneficial for bands.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, just even I think about where Greywalker is, like with streaming. You know what I mean? We made like $500 off Spotify last year.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a whole lot of plays on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I can't imagine how much money, like say somebody that's actually getting like millions of hits on Spotify that's an independent artist. They're just making off of that. And then that's not even including like, money they might be getting from iTunes or Bandcamp
Apple
or
Music,
all
like
those other
everything,
things. Like there is like, I feel like if you're on a label, you're probably not making anything from that. But if you're independently distributing your own music, I think you can make like a nice chunk of money for just stuff just existing online.
Mm-hmm.
And then you combine that with like, merchandising and playing shows. And again, if you're an independent artist, that's okay. Well, it's like, I'm my own manager, I'm my own label. So,
you own your merch, you own your publishing, you own everything.
Maybe this, this couple $100 from the show, that's to us. We don't have to split that with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are people like that do exist that are probably managing pretty okay.
I agree. And I don't particularly know exactly what the ins and outs or the nuts and bolts of that is, but obviously bands are going to still make music. People are going to still consume music. Someone's got to figure out some way to earn a living doing it. Maybe, what earning a living, everyone's standard of earning a living is
that's
totally
another thing
different.
too. Yeah.
And, someone's going to figure it out. And someone, I'm sure, it's occurring right now. But I think one of the benefits too of where we are right now is technology. Like we're sitting in your recording studio. You can make a Sikes record here in your room. You don't have to go out and, spend 60 days in some other room at, like in the old days, you were going to go to A&M Records and spend, 2 months in A&M Records at $2,000 a day.
There's a part of me though, that as much as I'm 100%, I always tell people if you need to get your own recording set up, even if you don't do final products there. I think anybody that's a musician or any band should be able to demo stuff out and be able to like really listen to it back, have that ability to kind of sketchbook out all of your ideas.
Listening back is critical.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were going to say something?
But there's part of me, like we're talking about all of these seminal metal songs before, right? And about how like there's like this just traditional format of music and all that stuff. Those weren't recorded in houses. Those were recorded in studios with producers and engineers. And there's a part of me that wonders like, is that what's missing in a lot of music? Because like a lot of these younger bands are recording their own music, and that's great. I'm not saying that it's bad, but just having that voice of the producer to really like kind of trim the fat on stuff and really help shape bands to create great songs. I wonder if there's an element of that that's missing in modern music.
I think so. Two things. One, professional engineers, guys who have made 50 records in their day, they know how to make records sound good. Just at getting the tones level.
Yeah.
And different producers do different things. Sometimes an engineer makes the whole record and the producer's just overseeing the whole thing. Sometimes the producer's in there with his hands on the board like an engineer. It's always different. But a good producer and a good engineer combo, they make a good sounding record. It sounds good. And and you can count on it. And they're going to make decisions on the songs too. The producer is. It's going to probably make that song more accessible. And that little part that that your girlfriend said she likes so much that kind of gives you a boner, that really nobody else gives a shit about. You can lose that part. Everyone's gonna still think you're rad. It's cool. But that's trim the fat there. And that's the conversation that a producer will have in pre-production. He's gonna tighten that song up, and not in a way that's trying. Especially if it's a really cool producer like a guy like Rick Rubin. He's not gonna go in and tell Red Hot Chili Peppers that they need to sound more like Johnny Cash, or he's not going to tell Johnny Cash, you need to sound more like Slayer. He's going to go in there and say, the thing you guys do really good, the thing that's really awesome about you is these 10 things. Let's do more of the 10 things that make you guys kick ass and unique. And these other 10 things that you were kind of like throwing in there, those aren't really adding anything. They're not making it any better. And they're actually kind of diluting what it is that you do.
Sure.
Let's focus on the good, trim the not so good, make you a better version of what you are already good at doing. And a good producer will go in and do that. And so, yes, I think a producer, somebody who's going to be the advocate of the final listener versus the advocate of the guitar player's ego he's going to lead to a better, at least a tighter
potentially
song
better.
arrangement.
Yeah. It's super helpful to have that outside opinion. I was going to bring up Rick Rubin a moment ago. I don't know how familiar you are with the Mars Volta discography.
A little bit.
But he did their first full-length album. And when it came time to do their second album, I remember hearing lore that they wanted to do it with Rick Rubin, but he was like, no, you guys know what you're doing. You guys should just do this yourselves because you have your own thing. And their second album it's good, but it's really uncontrolled. I feel that there's they self-produced, I believe, most of their records after that. But that one album that Rick Rubin did, like there's a control in the songs. It's like this had to have been his influence kind of helping guide them on some things.
Just keeping it in this area right here.
I mean, it's still pretty fucking out there, but it's just like it's tamed in a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like it's like they were getting ready to like throw another splash of hot sauce in the pot, but he grabbed there. He's like, no. It's good. It's just right.
It's just right. Yeah.
But without him in the room, they just went, fucking
more hot
nuts.
Sauce, yeah.
Fucking crazy. I would love to. That's one thing I've never done with any project I've ever done is like, work with a producer that understands like what we're trying to do. But it's like it's always been super underground, I guess. And there's always been that selfish part of me too. It's like, oh, fuck it. Who knows better than me? But, in my older years, and I've already how many albums have I technically produced myself? I have a good handful of them, right? So it could be fun down the line to like work with somebody, but then it changes the whole ball game of what you're doing. Like, do you even have the resources to do that as an underground band? It's a whole different thing. I have some good friends of ours that work with a producer that we play shows with, and I think like they're having some fundraiser show to fund their album. They trying to raise like 10 grand or something like that, and it's like, fuck, I can't imagine spending that much money on just recording an album, like but it's money well spent. Their stuff, it sounds great, so
I mean, if you spend $10,000 on a record, that's obviously it's not very much in the grand scheme of things. It's a lot coming out of your pocket, if you're a musician and you don't have a lot of money, but it's worth it if when it's done, if you go, God damn, that's a record that sounds like $1 million record. We spent 10 grand on.
I would love being able to, go into the studio and just do what I do. You know what I mean? Like
go perform, listen to playbacks. Sounds
That's-
good.
that's the-
Offer,
yeah.
the dream, the fucking dream.
That's
right?
the only way I know how to make records. So like I am probably terrible at making a record where it's like, okay, cool, we got to do this whole thing in 2 days. Like that's just not, I don't know how to do that. Really. I'm not like, as a drummer and a performer, as a musician, every time I've been in the studio, it's slow pace. And as an engineer and a producer, it's always, you take your time, so like when, if it's going to take 45 or 60 days to make a record, well, that's what it's going to take, 45 or 60 days to make a record. And you're going to track drums over the course of a week. And you're going to, you're going to spend a day getting tones, and you're going to sit back and you're going to go to lunch. You're going to come back and you're listen to some recording that you did and say, yeah, that sounds really good. I think we can make that snare tone. Let's move that snare mic a little bit. Let's futz this around.
Yeah, I hate how tense it can be. And I think that was a big part of the reason why we decided to self-record the majority of the Grey Walker album, was because we were trying to avoid that. But the thing that sucked was that Joey was still like, I just want to get my fucking drum parts done. So he recorded it was like an 8-hour session. He did the whole album. I mean, he did it. It sounds good, but there was also some parts in the album where it was like, oh fuck, that kick pattern wasn't right.
Mm-hmm.
So when we had to change guitar parts and things like that, because it was kind of rushed. But outside of that, the other guys were able to really take their time kind of recording everything and fine tuning stuff, but also having that ability to take all the time that you want because it's in your house can also be not the best thing.
It can be rabbit hole-y.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can go down your own rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So that's where a producer, even if it's just where somebody who's just going to say, hey, you've done 10 more passes of this and none of them are any better than the first one. They're different, but none of them are any better.
Yeah.
And so you just at some point you go, yeah, that's the pass. It sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
It's good.
I was when I did the Sikes record, I was really adamant about us not tracking more than 2 songs for anything in a day. Like we did a lot of just demo sessions. I probably recorded that album 4 times, to be completely honest with you. With all, it's like demoing for that project is literally exactly the same as recordings. It was in this room. It was just different tones, but we pretty much recorded the whole album 4 times. And but always like in those, when everything was finally in place, it was very much like, okay, we're just going to work on these 2 things. And if we have more time, then that's fine. Like we'll do something else. And then for me with like vocals, I'll track vocals for 1 song a day. And that's it. Cause I just want to be able to take my time, focus on this stuff, listen to it back, step away from it, instead of like, oh, well, I have the day off, so I'm going to record 5 fucking tracks in one day.
Especially with vocals, because your voice is going to get tired. It's going to you're going to get worn out. It's not like a drummer. You can play drums as long as you've got the stamina to play drums, but with your voice, it starts to go, then you're shot.
And also just making sure I'm actually in them. I'm sure there was a day or 2 where it's like, I'm not in the mood to do this, so I just didn't.
It is really cool though when you're talking about the dream. It's pretty cool to be able to go into these big rad studios and camp out. It is really fun.
I bet.
And whether you're a musician camping out and making your record, or whether you're producing or engineering a record and just camp out, it's really a luxury. And when I was doing that, I never took it for granted. We would be doing sessions we worked a lot at a studio called Henson in Hollywood, which was used to be A&M Studios.
Okay.
It's like We Are the World, it's like one of those mega studios, like Record Plant, A&M, which is Henson now, just a mega studio. So at any given time, like we'd be in one room and like literally the Stones, we're mixing a record in the mix room, Stones are across the hall, Mariah Carey's in another studio.
No shit.
And so like you're walking down the hall and there's Mick Jagger, you say hi to him and just shit like that. And so I'd be like, this is pretty damn cool.
Like I'm here, I'm in it. Right?
I get to navigate this world. It's pretty darn fun.
Fuck. So a question that I wanted to ask you earlier when we were talking about like developing new bands. And how a lot of the bands that you saw go through that process, like things didn't quite work out. Is there anything in particular that was like a common thread with those bands when it came to it not
like all the stars not aligning, or is it just always something a little different?
Well, sometimes it did work out, but
I guess, I mean, working out is like, that's
Someti-
subjective, like what is working it out, but
a lot of times it really comes down, I think it comes down to material, because like I said, I didn't work professionally. I stopped working professionally in that capacity in 2008. So it was still a different record industry. That was 10 years ago. So, I still develop stuff now. That's the thing I like to do now. But as far as developing to go to a major label, like specifically, this is why we were doing this.
yeah.
It was a different game then. Labels were still looking for bands, to put on the radio. And it was really only the beginning of the 360s FU over deal. So they were looking for bands to plug in to their machine still.
Yeah.
But I think mainly a lot of times it was just the material just didn't quite click. Like the material wasn't quite there.
That makes sense.
And short of getting in there and just writing songs for bands, which I'm not particularly good at that. My old partner Bob is good at that, but I'm not really. I'm not the guy who's going to go in and say, give me an acoustic guitar here, change that to this, put it to this, ba-dum, ba-dum, it's a hit.
Grab the tambourine.
Yeah, like that's not. I wish I had that talent because I would probably my publishing checks would look a lot different these days.
Sure.
But that's not really what I do. But I think a lot of times it was the material.
That makes sense.
Those bands, if a band says they want to be the next Nickelback, they got to have songs that the label thinks that they can say, oh, I can totally hear that in, contemporary rock format, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. And I know we can plug that into our machine.
Yeah.
Like that spits it out and it'll jam it into radio and it'll work. And I think a lot of times the bands just didn't have the material.
I think that is, you answered a good question, or you gave me a response that I was hoping you would, in a sense, because that's something that, looking in the mirror, being very self-reflective of like, why I feel like when it comes to my projects, Sikes and Grey Walker, I feel like there's a lot of things that we do right and that we do really well. And I'm very confident in that. And when it comes down to like, okay, like why isn't this working? There's always this voice in my head. It's just like the songs just aren't good enough. It's not that they're bad. They're just not on that level to really grab people. And I think it's like, that's a hard thing to kind of admit or say out loud, to be like, I'm trying to say it in a sense of like, okay, well, this is something that I see a problem and now I need to work on it. I think it's real easy for us to be in this thing where it's like, okay, well, cool, we have these songs, and then like, okay, well, let's spend some time, let's make a video and do this cool artwork and do all this cool promotional stuff and this fun packaging, all this stuff that I have a lot of fun doing, stuff that I actually think I'm a lot better at than making music. I think I'm better at the other end of stuff. It's almost like sometimes I wonder if I just write music because I want to put out like a fun product. Like I'm a lot better at the marketing than the writing, maybe, but I need to get better at it. I don't think I'm terrible, but it could be better. And I think that that's where, moving forward, me personally, I need to improve, is just like focusing on writing better songs, which was like something I tried to do a whole lot with this new Sikes album in particular, just being very more like, I always found myself being very weak in hooks and choruses and catchy stuff. I always wanted to do like, get like more weird with my electronics. And I really kind of push that back with this new body of material.
When you said they're like get weird with electronics, like for a Sikes record, that's the equivalent of shredding more riffs on a metal record.
Absolutely.
And then that goes back to what we were talking about a little while ago, where it was, I think in some instances, shredding and that kind of stuff is a compensation for just not being able to write very good hooks. And
that's how I feel about a lot of, I mean to cut you off, I'm so sorry, but metal bands that have like, oh, this like part into part into part into part. It's like, oh, you just can't write good songs. So you're just like, you're going to smash all this stuff together, label it as
a song,
progressive.
Yeah.
And then, some people will think, oh, they're challenging the status quo songwriting. It's so avant-garde.
And you know what? And some people, and for some people they are, and some people love that. But really, in the end of the day, 99.9% of people really do want hooks, even if they're metalheads. There's only a small percentage. And hey, if that's what you're into, do it better than everybody else.
Yeah.
If you want to write progressive stuff and, just really push that envelope, well, you've got to push beyond everyone else. Go for it. I mean, go all the fuck in. And I think that's really about intention. If that's what you intend to do, well, then do it with your best intention. And if your intention is to reach more people, then you need to say, well, what about our writing is limiting us from reaching more people?
It's always really funny whenever, say, somebody that's, I don't have a specific example, but I'm sure this person exists. We'll say default person in technical death metal band that will simultaneously complain like, well, I don't understand why everybody likes 21 Pilots or Bruno Mars or anything like that. Like, I don't get it. Like why isn't my shit? Why don't people listen to more stuff like what I'm doing? It's like, well, listen to what you're doing. It sounds like a murder scene. Like it's not, what you're catering to is a very small demographic of people. But then simultaneously, those same people, if there is a band that's kind of like in their realm or a bigger metal band that starts to get big, that might open up the doors for more people to enjoy the kind of music that they're making. It's like, oh, fuck that band. They're fucking selling out, It always blew my mind, like all the shit that Slipknot got. I understood like the gimmick thing, which I thought was cool. I was a teenager.
Sure, I think it's fun. I love Kiss and Alice Cooper.
They really, like, in terms of like extreme metal, they really pushed the envelope and I think introduced a lot of intensity to a wide appeal of young kids that never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think they get enough fucking credit for it. I really don't.
Well, I give them credit totally, and so, but I can see that, and it's just kind of jealous, bands get jealous. And
yeah.
When I meet guys like that, I hate to say it, but I really kind of run for the hills. When I meet a musician who is talking smack about other bands, and to me, that's an insecurity that's going to show up everywhere in their music. And it's almost for sure they're going to fail because they won't do the thing. They are already saying these guys doing the thing that we want to do that are doing it good. They're selling out. They're really already saying we don't even want to do that. Like that would be failing. It would be failing to succeed. So I'm like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with you guys. On the other hand, bands that like maybe they're the heaviest band in the world, but they come in and like, dude, have you heard the new fucking song, the new Bruno Mars track? That is fucking awesome.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, yeah, these guys just love music and they just happen to be they're really good at being in a super heavy band and they just like music. And then I'm like, I totally want to work with those guys because they are not going to put a ceiling over their success. They're not going to shoot down a simple riff that is really fucking hooky. Because it's not, it's too simple. They're going to write good fucking kick-ass songs. And I would be 10 times more interested in working with those guys than somebody who's just going to be bitter and small and talking smack. And that's going to show up in their songwriting. They're just going to be so narrow. They're not going to try anything good. And then they're probably not going to want any input from a guy like me anyway. Because what the fuck do I know? You're some old dude, blah, 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 blah. So I would just run just fast as I could go away from those guys.
Oh yeah, it's
nice talking to you, dudes.
It's the
peace
same,
out.
It's the same thing for me. It's like I just grow up, I guess, in a sense. Like, I just don't understand why you can't. It's so hard for some people to accept that other people enjoy things that they don't, and that it's okay. Like, I might not be the biggest fan of, I don't know, throw in any band, like Nickelback.
Yeah.
Whatever. A lot of people talk shit on Nickelback. I've never once in my life said Nickelback is the worst band in the world. I think they get a lot of undeserving flack. It's like, no, they're a really good rock band. Maybe, they've written some songs that I think are a little corny. I've never been a fan of them, but they're really fucking good at what they do.
They're good at what they do. Yeah.
I would never say anything bad about them or anybody that listens to them. Like, anybody that listens to them that's like taking their family to go to those shows and things like that, those are people that love that music and they're exposing people to music.
Sure,
and
it means something to them. Yeah.
So like I'm not going to be like look down on somebody that likes that or anything. I don't even like the most ridiculous like hot rapper of the week that like some 13-year-old kid likes. I'm not gonna be like, oh fuck these new rappers. Like that's silly. Like I never want to be that person that annoyed me when I was 13
Yeah.
talking shit on like the new upcoming bands, because I dealt with it a lot when I was growing up, and like oh fuck Slipknot, you know, being at metal shows and like people making fun of my Slipknot shirt. Like fuck you.
Yeah, but then like who at that time period, I'm just curious. At that time period when you're wearing a Slipknot shirt and you know you're young and people are going fuck Slipknot, who were they into instead? Like who would have been a viable alternative to Slipknot? Do you even know who that would have been at that time?
At that time, probably people I would, for example, when I was into Slipknot, I had some friends that were into some more like Cannibal Corpse.
Okay.
The more they were already kind of tapped into the more extreme stuff, you know, Cannibal Corpse or some black metal stuff, like Emperor, Cradle of Filth.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and then like you got your like Napalm Death and Dying Fetus and like
and those
all
guys,
that.
but those bands have been around for a while.
Yeah.
So they had already,
So,
like they were already there.
Like there was, but the thing was like I liked all of that stuff too, you know, but for me, I loved everything about Slipknot. I loved the whole packaging. I thought it was fucking great. It was just like,
sure. I thought they were really cool. And to me, it was kind of, it was a great example of how the music industry, you know, kind of goes way over here to the right, way over here to the left, you know, bam, bam. And every time that it goes back to another place where it was before, it's like what it was before with a big new twist. And so like when Slipknot came up, I'm like, oh my God, this is so rad. This is like the new Marilyn Manson, which was the new Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
You know, like, and like I could see like these new iterations of the same thing. Like, oh, I get it. That's totally cool. I love it. That's rad.
They were, the other thing that was really cool about them too is that there's not many other bands that nobody sounds like that. Like I could think of one band that's gotten kind of bigger in the past decade that almost kind of sounds like Slipknot, but not really. Like they just had this thing that was so uniquely them, because I feel like the songwriting was so good and they were so tapped into what they were doing and just how dynamic of a vocalist Corey Taylor is. It just gave him this unique sound that you couldn't emulate even if you fucking wanted to. I feel the same way about like System of a Down. Like they were just, that was them. Yeah. They did their fucking thing. They did it really good. And even
another Rick Rubin production.
Yeah, and if you wanted to fucking try to do that, like you couldn't.
No.
It was like the secret sauce, you know what I mean? Like that recipe wasn't getting out. Like you could listen to those songs all you want and try to write it, but unless it just came from this general internal chaos that was uniquely them.
Korn had that too. Like when they first came out, like they had their thing like, what the hell, what are these guys doing? What's this all about? And Jonathan Davis singing and just the whole thing. Like, wow, that's out of left field. And because it's out of left field and it's brand new, kids are loving it. It doesn't sound like their older brother's band that he liked or the band that his dad likes. You know, it's like that's their version of what a new metal band was going to sound like. And it's like, see totally why those bands were big like that.
One last reset.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Doing pretty good. I'm just going to let that roll. All right. Yeah, it was interesting. I feel for me in my particular come up, mentioned that growing up around like the classics because of my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I was like 12, 13, that's when like Korn and Slipknot and all that stuff started happening. So I loved that stuff. But what was actually interesting was like that was the stuff that kind of pulled me back into metal, because I went from being like Iron Maiden being my favorite band to Green Day putting out Dookie. And I was in like 3rd or 4th grade. So how am I not gonna love Green Day?
Yeah,
in like 4th grade, like I loved it.
Well, that's a great record.
It is.
Record's awesome.
All my friends were into it, and it was just very, you know. Then from there, it was like the Smashing Pumpkins happened, and then like it's so funny. So like that's my trajectory of favorite bands as a kid. It goes Iron Maiden, Green Day, Smashing Pumpkins, Slipknot.
That's all over the place.
And it's like to this day, that's still like I love all of those bands, but like Slipknot was the one that like, okay, it brought me back. Well, no, actually, sorry, Korn, Slipknot. Korn was the important step. It was Smashing Pumpkins, Korn, Slipknot.
Mm-hmm.
So Korn and then definitely Slipknot was what brought me back into like, oh, metal. But then the Smashing Pumpkins never left, and the Green Day stuff never left. Like all of that still existed within me.
Yeah, it all still stays in your blood. And
Yeah.
when you write, you're drawing, whether you even realize it or not. Hopefully you're drawing on all those things that were so important to you in the past. Because all of your favorite artists, and this is something I talk about a lot with young bands, is all of your favorite artists that came before you likely liked a lot of stuff that doesn't sound anything like what they play. You know, like they have a real broad influences. So like if you're a metal band, you know, and your favorite band is, well, I don't know, I'm just gonna use a guy like John 5. Like I was in a band with John 5 and I produced with John 5 Records. He's a buddy of mine, but anyway, you think like Manson and you think, Rob Zombie, but that guy loves like Kiss and like the most poppy music in the world, and Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
That's literally what he grew up
I
playing.
feel like you have to like that shit to be able to write those kinds of songs.
Yeah. And if you think about it this way, if your influences, if what you're doing is influenced by one generation of something before you, and all you listen to is that thing, then your wheelhouse of like what your creativity is going to be from here to here. That's all I listen to. I play right there and I listen to that. And then when you go to play and write, you're not going to push your boundaries. You never do. You never push your boundaries ever, no matter how wide they are. You stay in a comfort zone. Well, your comfort zone is this narrow little itty bitty thing. You're never going to break out of it. But if you like and learn how to play music that is like from just way over here that has nothing to do with the thing you do to way over here that has nothing to do, and all of a sudden your wheelhouse is super duper wide.
Mhm.
When you go to think about ideas, it's not going to be this narrow thing. It's going to be way over here, and then you can rein it in to get it to where it is, but it's going to have this wide open creative expanse at the base of it that you're going to be able to just draw on anything from the Beatles to Pink Floyd to Zeppelin to Black Sabbath, and you're going to throw it all in a pot someplace, and it's going to come out sounding a little more well-rounded as opposed to so rigid and tight.
I think that a lot of people, well, not a lot, but some people probably just don't analyze or think about it like that. I think, and also for some people, maybe they're totally content. Like they're playing in a band because they want to be, X hardcore band. That's
Yeah.
it. I like this kind of music. I just want to make this kind of music. That's all I'm into. And I guess if that's your intention, that's great. But I would definitely urge anybody that is a musician, if they've never asked themselves, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, really, like, why am I doing this? If you've never asked yourself that, I think you should.
I think anybody should do that. It's funny you say that because I kind of looked at 2019 and I said to myself, this is going to be the year of why. Like if I make a decision, why am I making that decision?
The other camera died, so we're going to do this. We're killing it right now.
Yeah, so I'm so glad you said that because it's really resonating with me right now. But even when I'm talking to young artists and I'm working with them, I usually kind of have a handful of form questions that I ask everybody, and there is no right answer to these questions ever. I always say like, well, what do you want to accomplish? Like, what is it? What's your end game? And there's no right answer. It's not like, oh, you need to answer the right answer for me so that
Sure.
I'm interested in working with you.
Yeah.
Or like, no, just literally tell me what's your end game. Like, what do you want to accomplish? Because that's the only way that I can help somebody get to their end game. I got to clearly know what is it that you want to do. And if what you want to do is be the kid who plays in the hardcore band and never really does anything but that, okay, well, cool. Well, then let's make decisions that support you being the kid who's in the hardcore band, and that's all you ever do.
Mhm.
Let's only make those decisions. Let's focus it on that.
Yeah, let's not waste our time
Let's not
on doing things that don't like,
that aren't
benefit
going
your
that aren't going to
desires.
get you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but if your desire is to be the next Nickelback, well, then let's make decisions to make you the next Nickelback. And if your decisions is to to do something different, this or that, well, let's make decisions. Now that we know that that's the end game, let's make our decisions to support that. And any decision that doesn't support it, we can push it off to the side. We don't have to worry about it. And you get you get to your end game 10 times faster. And so I think in general, musicians should really ask themselves that a lot. What's the end game here? What am I really, is your friend, is the kid who, like the textbook case who's in the progressive metal band complaining about another progressive metal band that's bigger than them? Well, what's your end game? Like, do you want to be where that guy is and you're just jealous that he's there? Which, if that's the case, stop. It's just eating you up. It's just making you pissed off. And if that is where you wanted to be, then cool. Then let's shoot for that. Let's shoot for that spot up there.
I do think jealousy can be a pretty powerful fuel for some people, though.
But is it jealousy or is it anger or is it proving? Or is it jealousy though?
Yeah, I guess.
Because I think there's a lot of things that might fall into that category, but I think there's some other fuel, like proving proving that you are as good as you people say you suck, fuck you, you're dead, you'll never amount to anything. Like, fuck you, yes I will, I'll show you.
Wrong,
like versus like those guys have nicer cars than
I
me.
guess
Fuck
it
that
isn't
guy.
jealousy as much as it is just
it's just like spite almost. Like, oh, fuck you, I'll show you. you know, and I think that can be a huge motivator. And for better or worse, it'll get you active. You'll make some decisions. Hopefully they're good ones.
Yeah.
And that is all, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. It was a lot of fun sitting down chatting with Sid. Again, super long conversation, which was why we had to split it up. Also, I don't know if you noticed some of the issues with the camera. If anything, this episode was proof of why I could use an extra engineer here in the room while I'm recording these episodes. So I don't know. If you're somebody that would be interested in coming by and helping me record audio and record video while I'm doing these episodes, I could really use it. I can't pay you anything until I have a sponsor or something. I don't know. Maybe you could sponsor the podcast, but instead of paying me money, you could sponsor the show by also being an engineer. That's probably a niche thing to ask for. There's probably like one person in Pittsburgh that has a business that could also engineer the podcast that would be interested in doing that. I don't know. If you're out there, let me know. Otherwise, I'll be back again next week with another episode. Same time, same place, same channel. You know the drill. My name is Sikes. Start the beat. 2019. Whoop, whoop. Thanks for listening. Yeah. Cool.